Okay, well, welcome everybody that's joined so far. This is Niles Township brand new job readiness clinic. This is being recorded, so please make sure your speaker is off. I see some familiar faces. We will have guest speakers, Andrea and Jonathan. They're from the ARC. Andrea is the director of Employment Services who created, developed, and has grown the ARC Employment Department over the last 18 years. In addition to being a professional resume writer, she uses her background in business psychology and theater to provide job readiness training. And she also owns her own private career coaching business in Chicago. And Jonathan, he currently serves as employment advisor on behalf of the ARC. He works directly with community businesses and organizations to match their employment needs with clients of the ARC and greater Chicago community. So they're going to do a great job. And if you have any questions, please send them through the chat. I'll be looking at them. If there's time at the end, we might be able to get to a few. Otherwise, we'll have the recording of this up on our website in the following days and maybe some answers to any of the questions that you guys submitted. So thank you all for joining, and I hope you enjoy our first job readiness clinic. And I'll have Jonathan and Andrea take it from here.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for the very nice introduction. And we're very happy you're here. And Jonathan and I do work together at the ARC. And we are hoping tonight to give you information that you will find useful. But we want you to know right off the bat that although we will be giving you information, we are also going to be giving you options. We're not giving you answers. We don't claim to have the answers. And especially each one of you has your own set of circumstances, your own situation. There's absolutely no way that we could give you answers individually. But here's the thing. Sometimes you might have the answers. The problem is that you have no one to talk about it with. You can't hear yourself talk. And it's very hard to put what you're thinking in motion when you don't have anyone to tell them about. So that's where we come in. We are going to be your partners. We want to be your listening board. We hear what you're thinking, we strategize with you, and hopefully we will be able to give you some sage advice, or as I said before, options. And one thing I'm going to ask everyone, do not keep it all in your head. Your head will explode, your head will fall off your body, and then we have a real problem. You need to find people to discuss your situation with and to hear yourself say certain things that eventually will create a message for you. Basically, our job is to give people a safe platform, and so that you can hear yourself and we can provide the assistance after hearing your thoughts. This is not about Jonathan or myself. This is strictly about all of you and what your situations are. One thing I think you need to start out in terms of asking yourself questions, and before we go any further, I just want to say one thing that's imperative to the success of a job search, to the success of being job ready. If you are not honest with yourselves, it's going to be a huge problem. It's going to be hard, it's going to be painful, but at the same time, it can be very invigorating and very eye-opening. Take a look at your skills. Be honest with yourself. Let's say this. Are you Are you still who you were professionally before your situation became challenging? That's not a simple yes or no. You're a human being with a lot of complexity. We have to tear that question apart and find out what the answers are. There's several answers to that. Let's think about this. Were you stuck in the job you had? And if you had to leave, would you really be considered for hire in the same position? And that may sound a little wordy. The bottom line is you were hired 8 years ago. You're really good at what you do. Did you keep up with the demands of that type of position? These are things you really have to ask yourself, and you have to do it now. This is the time to start asking all of these questions. Let me give you an example. I think it'll clarify it a little bit. Let's say you're a server in a restaurant, okay? And ask yourself, how realistic is it really going to be for you to keep applying for the same type of job, which sadly is not in demand anymore? It's slowly going away, which is horrible, and it makes me kind of sick to even say that. But you also have to face reality. And what if you keep applying within the same industry where you were a server, which again, I will repeat, sadly, that industry is facing tremendous adversity. So finding a replacement in a server position as well as in the industry, pretty remote. Pretty remote. It's horrible. And the truth is, here's the other thing. You didn't lose your job. It was taken from you. I mean, saying that makes me crazy. Saying that makes me crazy for anyone this has happened to. One suggestion is to now start evaluating and reevaluating your skills and try to identify other industries that can effectively use these skills that you've developed in your career. And, I don't want to hear from anybody, well, I don't have any other skills. Of course you do. Of course you do. You might be a server in a restaurant, but hello, do you know how to answer a phone? Well, guess what? That's a skill that can be highlighted. Depends how far you take it. I write resumes. You can take that real far. So do not cut yourself short. Do not shoot yourself in the foot by saying, I don't have any other skills. Now, you have to re-identify yourself. You have to think creatively, you have to think realistically, and you have to think fast. Is it stressful? Oh yeah, absolutely. And I often think when I talk to clients and they really don't know who they are professionally, go back to when you were a teenager. And every day you found out things about yourself, who you were and who you weren't. Guess what? Here you go again. So I think that we have to take the time now. And Jonathan.
Andrea, you bring up so many great points. And there's so many great examples. And I think through that, people start to identify why they're listening tonight. The one thing that I wrote down that I heard is now is the time. I wrote it down. Now is the time. One of the largest barriers to working on one's professional identity is coming to the realization that now is the time. Now must be the time. It cannot wait until tomorrow. I've started putting people into two professional buckets, if you will. There's two buckets of people that almost all of us fit into right now. One of those buckets is people who've lost their income, and the other bucket are the people who are worried about losing their income. Let that sink in for a moment. Either people have lost their income or they're worried about losing their income. There's no in between right now. I don't know of anybody that I know that feels 100% safe right now. And so now is the time. I wanted to bring up unemployment rate. I had a couple slides I wanted to share with people, kind of give some perspective of where we were at, where we've been, and where we're going. This first slide shows that back in the middle of February, our unemployment rate in the state of Illinois was approximately 3.4%. In a matter of 2 months, that unemployment rate moved to over 17%. So that takes us to the middle of April. We're up at 17%. The unemployment rate has dropped 3 points since then, down to 14%. That's attributed to the state in its reopening phases. Started around June 1st, and those numbers directly show a slide downward from 17 to 14%. However, there are factors right now that are going to negatively impact those unemployment numbers. PPP loans. I don't know how many people are aware of these, but let's have a brief conversation. PPP loan was given to small businesses, some small businesses, in an effort to keep people on the small business payroll. The government paid those small businesses to keep people on their payroll. That was instead of those people being laid off, furloughed, and being on unemployment. That PPP loan covered the time period from March through the end of June, and that has expired. That's gone. So that incentive, that government backing to keep people on payroll is now gone. COVID-19 cases are increasing. Doesn't matter where we're at, we see the uptick. I think 31 states, the last time we counted, I think Vermont's the only state going in the right direction. We're all aware that the flu season is right around the corner, and there's a much predicted second wave on the horizon. In these high stress scenarios, I want to remind everyone of something that I learned in the military. Every time we were in a challenging situation, almost to the person, I could hear someone say, work the problem. Someone in the room would say, work the problem. That goes all the way back to Apollo 13. Gene Kranz, flight director of NASA, famously quoted as saying, let's work the problem, people. Let's not make things work worse by guessing. When we talk about working the problem, the key to that is identifying and strengthening your professional identity. It's a huge step, the first huge step towards working that problem.
And to your point, Jonathan, there are really a number of meaningful activities which help us do just that. One great example, it's my favorite one, is reading job descriptions. First of all, it's a very easy thing to do. It's accessible, and it's kind of interesting. When you read the job descriptions, do you still have the qualifications for the position you feel that you're strongest in? Can you learn those skills? That's the question. And again, you got to take the time to really be honest with yourself. The most important question, do you want to learn them? I mean, so another thing you should ask yourself, do you have skills that translate? And by reading job descriptions, you're going to see a lot of information that will assist you in asking the right questions of yourself and providing the honest answers. Studies show that men and women, this is no big shock, job descriptions differently when they're reading it. Men will look at a job description and say, I can do that. Even when they've never done it before, no problem. I can do it. And they'll apply for the job. Women look at it a little differently. They look at the complete list of demands for a job. If there's one thing in there that they haven't had experience with or they're unsure about, nope, not applying for it. I mean, that speaks volumes. We could have a whole nother clinic on this. So I'm not going to really take a lot of time on it, but it's something to be aware of when you are looking at a job description. One thing I recommend when you read a job description is start paying attention to the running theme throughout the job descriptions. First of all, it's going to tell you why you are constantly attracted to a specific type of job. Figure it out. Figure out why. And ask yourself, do I really have what this position demands? And if I don't right now, how quickly can I get there? So again, it's simply complicated, but you got to be your own best friend here. You would want someone to be honest with you, so be honest with yourself. Jonathan.
So, Andrea, when we were talking about putting together this program, we started talking about what are training opportunities, and I immediately started making a list of all these great trainings that people could go to that were in the community, and I started looking at the expense of that. And then what I thought was, you know, since the pandemic has occurred, you and I have incorporated this whole new skill set that we've morphed into because of how our connection with people has changed. And I looked at just the training that we've done in the last 6 months that has helped us deal during this pandemic that's transferable to other employment opportunities. And so I made a list of those, just the training that we used for putting a session like this together. And things like advanced Microsoft Office, mail merge, Zoom technology, not just clicking on a button and going into a Zoom technology session, but actually hosting a session, sharing screens, putting people into breakout rooms, constant contact, which we use to communicate with people so that they can get information about this. At the end of this, there's going to be a survey, and that's SurveyMonkey, editing the video, posting that on YouTube or Vimeo or Filmora. Those are all skill sets that we've learned in the last 6 months that can be documented. And all of those trainings were free, and they were available directly from the provider. And those are things that could be put on a resume. And I'm here to tell you, I've had several conversations with employers where they are talking about each and every one of those skill sets as being things that they've looked for from candidates for employment in the last 6 months.
And we're going to encourage you to add to this list that Jonathan has created, and with free trainings. I want to tell you something. All of you are our teachers in many ways. We have expanded our knowledge and our learning curve by talking to people who are unemployed, and through their drive and through their motivation, they have found certain trainings that I never heard of. You know, so again, the conversation, the willingness to share information is incredibly powerful. I know the first questions that Jonathan asks every employer is, what obtainable skill is missing from your candidate pool? It's a fantastic question, because we then are ahead of the game. We know what to advise clients, and that's because Jonathan knew what question to ask, and it works. So For any employer who might be sneaking on here to see what we're talking about, chat with us. Let us know what's missing from your candidate pool. Let us help you. Let us tell you about these incredible people who have that skill. I hope this is all making sense to everybody. I mean, it's making sense to me, but you know, you're being inundated with a lot of information. So, okay, it would be in your best interest to not simply say, okay, I'll get the training, I'll get the certification. Bad idea. You would never buy a car or even, you know, a 30,000-inch TV without doing the research on it. No one's going to walk in and say, okay, I like that color, I'm going to take it. You have to do the research. Due diligence is imperative when making choices about your career. Look, we spend more time at our job than we do with our families, and for sure we spend more time at a job than we do at leisure type things. So you owe it to yourself to explore the type of certification, if it's really worth your time. Find out what the certifications and or training really means. Find out how realistic the chances are for your situation to secure work. There is never a guarantee. You all know that. There's never a guarantee. But here's the thing. When you're unemployed, one of the best things you can do is remain productive and hopeful by improving yourself and improving your overall professional identity. And here it is, growth.
So, Andrea, I have a trivia question for you. I think you've already said it at least twice today. Tell me what your favorite saying is when it comes to being the expert.
No such thing as an expert.
So whenever I say something, I never make it public until I find an expert that says it.
Here we go.
I run to Andrea and I say, Andrea, I've got confirmation from an expert. And so let's talk about that expert who's also a shark. Found some information that I was actually listening to an interview with Mark Cuban. And Mark was talking about his advice for Americans who are out of work because of COVID. The number one thing he said was collect unemployment, apply quickly, make sure that you're continuing to do the certification to get your unemployment. Don't stop applying for jobs, and make use of whatever downtime you might have to brush up on the skills that might impress your future employer. And then he said, the question that I said would be the one question that every employer is going to ask at the end of this. What did you learn during the pandemic? What skills did you acquire during the pandemic? That's what's going to make the difference for employment both during this process and after. He went on to talk about new industries. He talked about jobs being created as a result of the crisis. As you read those job descriptions, what can easily happen is almost like a V8 moment. You'll be reading a job description for yourself, for a job that you think that you want, and then you'll suddenly realize there's this other really cool job that you had never even thought of before, maybe even a job that you never even heard of before, that's a perfect fit for you. I mean, who would have thought of contact tracing 6 months ago? But now all of a sudden, I've got people coming out of the woodwork going, I'd be a great contact tracer. And normally I don't listen to people when they say, oh, well, this is going to create all kinds of new industry, because we've heard that. But coming from Mark Cuban, a guy who slept on a hardwood floor coming out of college and moved to Dallas because it was a place where a kid out of college was most likely to get a job, and he entered an industry which most people weren't working in at the time, the industry of computers, and he's made it work. So if that guy's telling me that I need to help people be prepared for the new industries that might come out of this, then that's what we need to do, is help people for those new industries and those new jobs, those new opportunities that are coming out of this. And when our mind takes us to thinking about that, you got to be able to broaden your identity or even change your identity.
I'll tell you, one of the things that we take great pride in is something called laddering. And we take great pride in ourselves on ladder with you for employment. So if you have a destination in mind at the top of the ladder and you're not quite sure what you have to do to get there, you go through each rung. You can't go running up the ladder because you will fall and you will break in half. So we never recommend that. What we do recommend, and again, it's an option, you go through each rung so that by the time you get to that destination that you want to be at, you're strong, you're confident, and you're entering your destination with a certain drive and a certain attitude. And attitude, by the way, is a big deal when you're looking for work. Because if you talk to people, by the way, and you have this chip on your shoulder, like, really? We have enough problems in the world. I don't need you coming to me with a chip on your shoulder. It's easier said than done, and I know that, but just a little bit of information. Try and be optimistic. Jonathan?
Look, I'm not a doomsdayer by any means. But I want people to think about worst case scenario. I'd rather discuss worst case scenarios and have it not be that bad in the end than to be your friend or your pal who tells you everything's going to be okay tomorrow and you wake up 6 months from now and it was the worst case scenario. You know, in my opinion, if you're not currently working, you have to take a real look at how long is it going to be until that position returns. If you are currently working, I think you got to play out that same worst case scenario and ask yourself what happens if your position's gone tomorrow. What if you wake up tomorrow and go to work and the boss says, can't do it anymore, I'm pulling the plug, we're not making ends meet, it doesn't make sense to stay open. You know, and when we talk about the laddering that you were talking about earlier, we can accomplish two things. We can minimize the hole that's being dug during this pandemic, and we can ladder at the same time. When I talk about minimizing a hole, we all know that things go bad sometimes. And when things go bad, I always use the metaphor of you're digging a hole. The question is, at the end of this, how deep is that hole going to be? What can we do collectively as a community to ensure that at the end of this, your hole is as small as possible so that it's easy or easier for us to help you climb out of that hole? The pandemic unemployment assistance, the federal extra $600 a month, that's going away. It expired. Will they get together and come together on a decision for something going forward? We certainly hope so. None of us anticipate that it's going to be $600. Some of us anticipate it may not be anything. But whatever it is, part-time employment is an option to help bridge that gap between today and a better day. You know, we've also talked about volunteer opportunities, and you know, volunteering is not what it was 6 months ago. Volunteering 6 months ago was something you did on the side, and maybe you brushed up on some skills that you were lacking. Now, in my opinion, volunteering is about how can I connect with people that are going to help me network, to help me minimize my hole. Who can I work with? What business can I partner with? What can I do for them so that even if they're not the ones that hire me, that word of mouth of me working with them, me showing them something, me learning something from them pays off in the long run towards me minimizing my hole.
Very, very, very strong point. Jonathan. Sometimes during unemployment, especially as a result of something as terrifying as COVID-19, people tend to forget the emotional and psychological impact that this is having on all of us, whether you're working or not. Certainly much worse if you're not working. Frustration and anger and fear and unfortunately depression are real, very real during this time, and it can invade your head without any warning, without any notice. Losing your identity, especially through no fault of your own, creates, Jonathan called it a hole, creates an emotional quicksand. And really are hoping, and we're pulling for all of you to please reach out and grab on to any type of limb or hand that extends itself and get out of there. I know it's a lot easier said than done, and we want you to keep networking, talk to people, which, by the way, is probably going to be our next topic, should we come back and do this again. I think networking, especially in today's insanity, is essential. Thank you.
So we're going to do a couple things here. First and foremost, on the last side was our contact information. So when Andrea speaks about networking, please feel free to start your networking with one or both of us. In addition to that, we're going to start with questions and answers now. In a few moments, Niles Township is going to start putting up a survey and a poll, so please stick around and participate in that. And I would also encourage you, we're going to have a slide a little bit later on with Niles Township information. Please go to their website and register for their e-newsletter. It's got great information on there, great way of identifying resources that are available for you. And you know what? It's not always about you, but it's about when that next door neighbor is complaining about something that they don't have an answer to, that they have a need and you can't fulfill that need. It's great to have a resource to point them in the direction towards. And from everything I've seen in Niles Township, the answers are on that website. So please go there and sign up for that e-newsletter. Did we have any, I know that we've been answering some questions individually through our administration on the chat session, but if anybody wants to unmute and ask a question, feel free to do so.
I have a question. Say you get a job, say it's downtown, and you're getting something, public transportation is not the safest thing. Parking, there goes your whole salary. It's kind of hard to first of all, a lot of places aren't even open. So how do you plan on pursuing jobs when going there and doing it could be hazardous to your health?
They're all incredible questions that you're asking, and that's like 30 questions in the 3 that you brought up, all very valid. You know, I can't speak for these businesses, but if you are the right candidate and it is the type of position that you can work remotely, I am going to tell you that most businesses now consider that possibility much stronger than they have in the past. First of all, working remotely saves them a ton of money on many, many levels. A lot of businesses are moving to smaller locations, not paying the rent that they were paying before. And I think I believe in being very transparent. If you tell a potential employer that the only way you can get there is through public transportation, and you are anxious about your health, put it in their lap. Don't overtalk it. Don't tell them anything about yourself personally or your health, just that you are experiencing the same anxiety that I'd say 90% of the world is experiencing. What do you think, Jonathan?
Yeah, two real quick points, and thank you. That's a great answer. Adding to it, Dr. Jen on ABC talks about risk versus reward, and that's for any activity, whether it's going somewhere, doing anything, shopping, working. It's risk versus reward. What is the risk? What is the reward? And no other individual other than yourself can weigh either one of those. Going back to the situations that you explained, there's a difference now in July than there was in March. Correct. In terms of working with an employer. The conversation in terms of being able to go to an employer and say, here's my situation, and then working with you to help figure it out has changed drastically. And I can speak directly to, not your circumstance, but I can speak to the parking situation. And I actually had someone who was in that situation where they were working downtown and they were afraid to take public transportation, but they wanted to go back to work. They were making a good salary, and working remotely wasn't an option for them. And they explained that to the employer, and the employer was actually able to find free parking in the garage that didn't exist before because that free parking was with another employer in the building. But that employer was no longer using that free parking because their employees were working remotely. So they gave the free parking to the next door employer and allowed their employees to use that free parking. And had the employee not initiated that conversation with the employer, they would have never known about that free parking and may not have gone back to work.
It's a very different time. 6 months ago, they could have cared less. But now, employers are also human. They are thinking about their health as well. I hate to sound like a TV ad, but we are all in this together. No one is not sensitive to a situation. And the truth is, if you really are a prime candidate, they will definitely work with you.
That was a great question. I think we have a couple others.
Hi, tech support here.
Thank you, tech support.
So one attendee would like to know how they find an individual or resource that can help with specific software programs. And leading into that, also, are there places that offer one-on-one career assistance in the area? So first, software training programs, and then career assistance.
Jonathan, you know a little something about that.
Well, so we have relationships with companies that offer software training programs. It's an offline conversation because not only do we need to make sure that you have the hardware to support the training program, because all those trainings are being done remotely now. It's also a conversation to see if you qualify and what training programs you qualify for. So rather than going down that rabbit hole, what I would ask you to do, and that's a great question. That's part of, we provided, and there's our contact information again. Feel free to reach out to either one of us. I think that question for me with software is probably better coming to me, but feel free to reach out. I'll give you all the resources I have. We'll have a conversation about where you're at, what you're wanting to learn, what your barriers are to learning that, and help you move forward. And what was the second part of that question?
The second question was, are there places that offer one-on-one career assistance? And are there free headhunters in the area that help? What companies, where can people go to get that kind of assistance? And then we have another question after you answer that.
So let me answer that question too. I don't call myself a headhunter. I call myself a matchmaker. I work on behalf of companies to help them find the employees that they need. I work for the ARC, so obviously I'm always trying first and foremost to place the people who are clients of the ARC, but I also work for those companies. So if I can't find a person at the ARC that fills the need for that company, of which there are several right now, with several open positions that I don't have the ability to fill with an ARC client, I still want to provide that company with an employee. That keeps a relationship between me and that company strong and viable. And so the next time they have an opening, they reach out to me. So I always encourage people, if they're interested in employment, to feel free to reach out, provide me a resume, and be part of that stable of resources that are available to provide to an employer.
I will also say that Jonathan and I also work privately with individuals who may need assistance with developing a resume, need assistance with really knowing how to interview, especially on Zoom, which is a whole different world right now. We are happy to provide job readiness information. That is my area. And again, as Jonathan said, we are a team, we are a force, and we work together all the time. And if you would like to speak to a job professional about specific issues, please feel free to call.
Next question, what companies and industries are hiring contact tracers? How would you go about finding one of those jobs?
That's a great question, and I'm going to let Jonathan answer that because it's a sore spot.
So approximately 3 months ago, I put out information from the Illinois Department of Public Health that they were taking information from people so that when the health department was ready to hire people for contact tracing, they had that contact information. I put that information out to our entire constant contact list and was inundated with, how do I get this job? So the first step was letting the Illinois Department of Public Health know that you were interested in what county you lived in so that you could be on the list of people that they would reach out to. At the time that I did that, again, not being the expert, but I said and looked for some expert to affirm it, and Governor Pritzker did that there was no money in the budget for contact tracers. And in addition to there being no money in the budget for contact tracers, the difficulty of doing contact tracing when it's not being done over a broad area in terms of land and other states is difficult. And now, what we've seen even as another barrier in other states is that if it takes more than 3 to 4 days to get a result of a test, again, contact tracing does no good because you can't contact trace someone's activities for a 14-day period of time that they were waiting for a test result. Having said all that, the state of Illinois is in a better place in terms of turning those tests around. And they have started looking at hiring some initial contact tracers outside of the public health department and the original employees that were doing contact tracing from the public health department. As that company moves forward ramping up, we'll provide some additional information. I will tell people right now that the hardware specifications are stringent, and that you have to have an Ethernet connection, and that you have to have an upload and download speed that configures with their needs. We can have that conversation offline, and if you fall into that category, I can give you the information to help you move forward.
So I'm not sure you can answer this yet, but can you be a contact tracer in another state?
Um, let's work on our state first, and then we'll branch out to another state. What I saw, and it's funny that you asked that question, because the first state to actually start hiring contact tracers was New York State, and the answer in New York State was no. If you didn't live in New York State, they weren't allowing you to be contact tracer, and there were a couple reasons that Governor Cuomo gave for that. One was that those were public dollars that were going towards the contact tracing program, and they wanted those dollars spent by the government to stay inside that state, which made the most sense. And then outside of that, they wanted people that could most relate to the community that they would be serving as a contact tracer.
I'm also going to say that with contact tracing, although it's kind of this new unexplored territory, it's very much, it's comparable to the Census Bureau, where